Hi, and welcome to the Feet of Jesus, where we are going through the entire Bible, one book at a time. We are in Genesis, at the very beginning of the Bible. We are using this workbook. You know what? We have 97 subscribers. If you are a normal subscriber, get 3 of your friends to subscribe. So I don't know what I'm going to do, but my second goal was 100, and I already have it in my head that the next goal will be 200. So we've been, just like we're trying to lose weight, we've been stuck at 95, 96, 97 for a while. So if you have not subscribed, subscribe. We're getting through the book of Genesis. We've already done 2 books in the New Testament, and I'm learning a lot. So I hope regular watchers are doing a lot too. So join us on a regular basis, subscribe. So let's get into it. We are studying Genesis 10 and 11 this week. And I don't know about you, but I was a little nervous. I looked at that and went, oh my goodness gracious, this is one of those that is this person begot this person, begot this person, begot this person. How am I going to have anything to say? And I started studying, and oh my goodness, did I find things to say. So I'm excited to get into it. So let's go. So Genesis 10 is really called the Table of Nations, because remember, the flood just subsided. Noah just got off the boat. And God has said in chapter 9, repopulate the earth. So they have a job to do. and this chapter, these 2 chapters really show us that they get it done. So Noah has 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Or Japheth. Interesting things. I just started delving into their families. I actually created an entire sheet of Noah's family tree, because that I had to have that visual to be able to start looking into it. And I learned some interesting things. First of all, I learned that Shem's lineage is the one where we get the Israelites. It's where we have Abraham. It is truly, as believers and as Jewish believers specifically, but even us who are grafted in, that is where our lineage comes from spiritually. Now, the other 2 are Japheth and Ham. So very quickly, Japheth is just a little interesting. We don't have a whole lot of information about him, but it is thought through extra biblical information that I studied, because I had to I got into a lot of historical data this time, and it was really interesting. If you just want to get lost in stuff from the Bible, go look up one of these names and you'll get papers and papers that you can read, and it's really actually kind of fascinating. But what we learn is that Japheth's line is the one that people believe were in the north of Israel and actually up into Europe. Now, here's something interesting, especially for those of us in the United States and specifically in the Southwest. Remember, our American Indians, our Native American Indians, they believe came through Alaska and actually through Europe. So it is my belief, again, this is even more than extra biblical belief, this is Heather's thought. I kind of am starting to think that maybe our American Indian cousins here in the United States come from Japheth's line, which is interesting. And then it just depends on where you're from, where your native ancestors are from, as to what line you actually come from. My family comes from Scotland and England, and they do, the historical people believe that that would be Japheth's line. So that's where I'm from. So Ham's descendants get a little interesting. So their descendants settled Africa and parts of Arabia. And they were the ones pushed out of the promised land with Moses and Joshua. When Moses leads them in the book of Exodus to the promised land, but then Moses dies and Joshua takes over. Joshua and the Israelites settle the promised land, and they are actually the ones that push Ham's descendants out. And here's an interesting thing. Do you remember when we were in Genesis 9, Genesis 9:22, it says, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and, oh, nope, I'm not there, sorry. Okay, 9:6. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. And as for you, be fruitful and multiply. Bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply in it. I'm going to keep reading. Then, I am still in the wrong place. I did that last week too. Excuse me while I go to the right place. So we are in Genesis 9 in verse 24. And I'm looking at it and I know it's the right place this time. So Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done to him. Then he said, cursed be Canaan. Now remember, Canaan isn't his younger son. Who is his younger son? His younger son is Ham. Okay. But he says, cursed is Canaan, a servant of servants. He shall be to his brethren. And he said, blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. That's big. So he's saying Ham's descendant, Canaan, is going to be cursed. And a lot of places call that the Canaan curse. So, first of all, let's talk about for a second, what was the whole curse about? What did Ham do? Remember, Noah had gotten drunk to the point that he passed out naked, and Ham walked in and saw him. And I've read a lot of commentaries, and I think a lot of commentaries get a little bit casual about what the sin was. The sin wasn't Ham accidentally seeing his father naked. The sin was what happened afterward. Do you remember what happened afterward? He went and told his brothers about it. He went and gossiped about it instead of taking care of the situation and putting a animal skin or a piece of clothing or a cloak or something, putting something over his father. He went and gabbed about it. That was the sin. So why would Noah curse his grandson for what his son did? I think that this is a prophetic curse. So he's saying this is what's going to happen. Now, this is the interesting part that I delved into this week, and I really want you to hear me. Interesting. What happens, that exact curse actually comes into play. Now, what you have is Cush, who is one of the sons of Ham, and Cush trains his children, and it may have come from him, but I know that Cush completely trained his children to be strong warriors, and this is a curse that's going to happen, but we're not going to let that happen. That's not going to work. We're going to be strong, mighty men. So what do you get? You get Nimrod, Nimrod, if we look at verse 8 of chapter 10, okay, I'm going to read from there. Cush begot Nimrod. Here's an interesting thing. I remember maybe in my past people being called a Nimrod. Have you ever heard that? I thought, oh, that has to be connected. So I looked it up, and actually it is. It's an inept person. So Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be a mighty man on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Okay, that sounds all good and well, right? When you look up the word before, actually that can mean, and I believe in this case it does mean against. So let's read that again. It says he was a mighty hunter against the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord, against the Lord. And The beginning of his kingdom was Babel. He really was the center and the driving force behind the Tower of Babel, which I know we're going to get into in chapter 11, but I'm going to touch right now on it. It was this giant tower. On the top of it, they were trying to get this tower that not even God could touch. They were going to go up to the heavens and show God who was boss. Well, what do you think happened there? Okay, so interesting stuff. Let's see what else we can get. Verse 11, from that land he went to Assyria and built Nineveh. How do we know Nineveh? So Nimrod, this guy that's a mighty hunter against the Lord, he builds the Tower of Babel that we're going to get into a little bit more in just a second. And then he actually is the one that builds Nineveh. Okay, remember Jonah and the whale and how wicked Nineveh is. And Jonah is sent by the Lord to go tell Nineveh how awful they're being and how they need to turn from their nasty ways. And Jonah goes, I don't want to talk to them. They're really, really bad people. They're nasty people. I don't want to go talk to them. And God chases him down. Jonah gets stuck in the belly of a whale, right? And then he finally goes, okay, got it. And then he goes and talks to Nineveh and turns them around. So that's the same Nineveh. Isn't that interesting? Okay, maybe I'm just a Bible geek and I like this stuff. But anyway, then we're going to read in chapter 10, verse 21. It says, and children were born also to Shem. Remember, Shem's line is the one that has Abraham and the Israelites in it. And we're about to see why. And the children were born also to Shem, the father of all the children of Eber. Now you might have gone, what does that mean? What that means, the children of Eber, Eber means the region beyond. What this is saying is these were the earliest cultural Hebrews. So I think that's interesting. So we have Shem's kids. So he had Elam. Elam is the one that settled Elam. Azur, who settled Assyria. Arphaxad, which in different versions is different names, but they're all similar. So Arphaxad, who is the one that settled Chaldea. Lud, which is settled Lydia, and Aram, which settled Syria. So before we get into chapter 11 for just a hot second, I wanted to look because it struck me in verse 31 of chapter 10. It says, these were the sons of Shem according to their children, according to their languages in their lands, according to their nations. In other words, they had multiple languages. Then in chapter 11, we get to the Tower of Babel where everybody's one language. And I was like, huh? Okay, so I think the best way to describe it, and in my opinion, this is not me coming forth with actual proof, but my opinion is that the Tower of Babel and this whole thing happens in the midst of these generations that we see in chapter 10. So chapter 10 is going through all these generations in this time frame, and Babel happened in the middle there. So that's what my thinking is. And so then they did have all their own languages. Okay, so moving on. One interesting thing in verse 3, it says, in some versions it says asphalt, but in some versions it mentions bitumen, bitumen, bitumen. I went ahead and looked it up. That is modern day asphalt. That is what is on the blacktop on our roads. I thought that was interesting. It was part of how they built the Tower of Babel. And then in verse 7, let's read that. Let's see what we may find interesting. Come, let us go down there, confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. What might I have clued in on? us, capitalized. Who is us? God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. If you are ever curious about where Jesus starts in Genesis 1:26 or 1:24. I always mess those up. Let's see, Genesis 1:26. Let us make man in our image. And here we go with us. Together, the three parts of the Holy Spirit are going to come down. And I love that. And they are the ones that confuse the speech. So the word Babel actually means confuse. I thought that was kind of interesting. And that is still a term that we have, that speak up, you're babbling. You know, same thing. Interesting thing. So let me see if there was anything else I wanted to say. Cush. Okay, I mentioned that. Okay, the last part we have in chapter 11, we have verses 27 through the end of the chapter, and that's where Terah's descendants, what they do. So Terah is Abram at that time, Abram's father, and so Terah, Abram, and Abram's nephew Lot, and Abram's wife Sarai. They all leave. We don't know why they leave. I looked up some historical data that said that there were some famines and there was just some bad stuff going on where they lived, but we don't know exactly why they left. But they left, and they were moving from Ur, and you know, this is not Ur of the Chaldeans yet. That's going to happen later. But later, it is mentioned Ur of the Chaldeans because there were I think 5 different Urs. So we always think of Ur of the Chaldeans. I've heard that term before. This is that one, but the Chaldeans didn't actually exist quite yet. So they were moving from Ur to go to Canaan. But they stopped along the way in this chapter. Now, pretty soon, you'll see they get all the way to Canaan. But for some reason, they stop in Haran. And it's interesting. So Abraham, I just wanted to go through a little bit of this. Abraham actually grew up in what is modern-day Iran and Iraq. And his native town was Ur through Arphaxad, who was Noah's grandson and founded what would become Chaldea. And then they moved from Ur toward Canaan. So I'm going to I don't have a map in front of me, but Israel looks like this. It's a long, skinny, go look at a map. Ur is way over here, and they were moving from there, and they went up here to Haran, and they stopped. Canaan was down here. Okay, so they were going from Ur up to Haran and down to Canaan, but they stopped there when Terah was with them. So I just thought that there were some interesting things in there, even though it was one of those chapters that was this person begot this person, and I thought that the Nimrod stuff was fascinating. I didn't know all of that. So my main themes this week was that Noah's family repopulated the earth. And I know I told you this at the beginning, but Lud is one of, I believe, Lud is one of, I believe, Shem's descendants, one of his sons, and so one of Noah's grandsons. You can look up L-U-D, Lud. You can look it up and find out all sorts of things about him. Now, some of it is biblical, some of it is extra biblical. What do I mean by extra biblical? There are historians you can look up. One of them that we've mentioned before is, and his name is going away from me at the moment, I can't think of his name, but there are some, if you are ever interested, just look up his name. Josephus. Josephus is the historian that we've talked about before, that lived back then. And so he has some interesting stuff that you can get. But then there's some other historians from way back when that we can find out. And you can just find out all sorts of history about these people. So Noah's family repopulated the earth. That to me is a Well, duh, kind of main theme. The other is that God directed Noah's children to paths of righteousness, because we know that was Noah perfect? No. Noah got drunk. Noah passed out in his home, in his tent, but he was righteous. That means he had a heart to do what was right. And God wanted Noah's children to also have that heart. And so God pointed his children to paths of righteousness. Some took those roads, that road of righteousness, some didn't. That was what I got out of those 2 chapters. So, theological implications. Remember, that is what is God wanting us to understand. I think for me, my big thing I got out of it this week was being raised in a righteous home doesn't make us righteous. I think that there's still so many people all over the world who believe that since they go to church, they're going to heaven. Since they were born in a God-fearing home, they're going to heaven. I think my application that goes with my theological implication is that we each are responsible for our own righteousness. We are each responsible for walking the path that God asks us to walk. And God created that path for us to walk down, for us to have wonderful, positive natural consequences. But you know what? He will also allow you to take a path that you want to take that is not part of his plan. He let Nimrod have that plan. He let many of Ham's descendants have a different plan. And then they had the natural consequences that went with it, which is the Canaanite curse. They did get driven out of the promised land. They did have awful things that happened to them, and they did become servants to Shem's children. And that's because it was a natural consequence of not taking the righteous path that God provided for them. I could sit on that point for a while, but we will move on. I am going to let you tell me a verse that you think is a verse that really spoke to you this week. I would love for you to tell me in the comments. Just let me know. And then finally, our verse that we were studying. So our verse to study individually was Genesis 11:9. Therefore, its name is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the earth. So my points of observation were, first of all, what does Babel really mean? And remember, we talked about that. That means confusion by mixing. And then he scattered them. I would love to know how he scattered them. I don't know, and we are not told. I have a feeling he made it where they had to leave for some reason or another. Maybe it was natural disaster. Maybe there was other things that were going on. But somehow God made them leave. And my application, I'm sure it was uncomfortable what God was doing. It was uncomfortable when he confused their language. It was uncomfortable when he scattered them and made them leave. I've had uncomfortable things happen in my life. Have you? I'm sure you have. And when that's happening, I can't stand it. I don't want to be there. But what I am learning as I get older and as I read and study my Bible, I'm learning that is through the grace of God that he does allow us to go through uncomfortable things. Because time and time and time and time again, through those uncomfortable times, I have learned a lot. And so my big thing was, but God. I have a big cup that a friend of mine, Janice, gave me a long time ago, and all it says, it's a travel mug, it says, but God. I went through this horrible thing in Chicago, but God. There's all this COVID going around, but God. New Mexico's numbers are skyrocketing, but God. There's a lot of people that are experiencing a lot of fear right now, but God. God's in control. He always points us to a better road. and he always establishes our steps. I've said it before, my daughter has that verse, Proverbs 16:9, tattooed on her foot, so that she remembers who is putting her foot down where it's going, because she wants to always allow God to establish her steps. God won't make you, he won't pick up your foot and put it where he wants. It's a choice we both have to make. And so that's my takeaway. I want God to put my foot down, and I want to allow God to put my foot where he wants it, even if it's uncomfortable, because it'll always lead to a better path, right? So, my friends, we are doing next week chapters 12 and 13. Isn't it crazy when you're doing 2 chapters at a time and sometimes 3, how quickly this goes? So what are we going to put at the feet of Jesus today? Let's put those, what we were talking about at the end, those paths of righteousness and the paths that God allows us to choose, and let's put that desire to go this way. Put it at Jesus's feet. Let Jesus take care of that bad desire, so that our desire is always to go down the path he has established for us. Let's do that. So friends, I don't know what you're going through today, but I'm praying for you, and I'm loving on you, and I'm just putting you at the feet of Jesus as well, because God always loves us. He never forsakes us, and he is always there. So, my friends, God's got this, because he always, always, always does.